of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, don't be restless. Remain quietly concentrated in your heart, and you will find me there. With always my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Sri Aurobindo's Savitri. Book 1, The Book of Beginnings, Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge, page 59. A light grows in her. She assumes a voice. Her state she learns to read, and the act she has done. But the one needed truth eludes her grasp, herself and all of which she is the sign. An inarticulate whisper drives her steps, of which she feels the force but not the sense. A few rare intimations come as guides. Immense divining flashes cleave her brain, and sometimes in her hours of dream and muse, the truth that she has missed looks out on her as if far off and yet within her soul. A change comes near that flees from her surmise, and ever postponed compels attempt and hope, yet seems too great for mortal hope to dare. A vision meets her of supernal powers that draw her as if mighty kinsmen lost, approaching with a stranded great luminous gaze. Then is she moved to all that she is not, and stretches arms to what was never hers. Outstretching arms to the unconscious void, passionate she prays to invisible forms of gods, soliciting from dumb fate and toiling time what most she needs, what most exceeds her scope. A mind unvisited by illusions gleams, a will expressive of soul's deity, a strength not forced to stumble by its speed, a joy that drags not sorrow as its shade. For these she yearns and feels them destined hers. Heaven's privilege she claims as her own right. Just is her claim, the all-witnessing gods approve, clear in a greater light than reason owns. Our intuitions are its title deeds. Our souls accept what our blind thoughts refuse. Words of our Divine Mother, taken from the compilations of the Divine Mother's work, book The Sunlit Path, topic The Spirit and the Psychic Being. Spiritual experience is a subtopic question, sweet mother. You speak of spiritual experience. What is an experience and how can one have it? For this, our Divine Mother says, it is something which puts you in contact with a consciousness higher than the one you usually have. You have a certain feeling about yourself. You are not even aware of it. It is for you your ordinary condition. You understand? If suddenly you become conscious within of something very different and much higher, then whatever it may be, this will be a spiritual experience. Our Divine Mother says, you may formulate it with a mental idea, you may not formulate it. You may explain it to yourself or you may not. It may last or it may not. It may be instantaneous, but when there is this essential difference in the consciousness, and when naturally the quality that comes is very much higher, clearer, and purer than what one usually has, then one can call this as a spiritual experience. This means that there are thousands of different things which can be called as spiritual experience. Question, sweet mother, should we aspire to have a spiritual experience? For this, our Divine Mother says, I think it is wiser to aspire to make progress, or to be more conscious, or to be better, or to do better than aspire for a spiritual experience. For this, our Divine Mother says, I think it is wiser to aspire to make progress or to be more conscious or to be better or do better than aspire for a spiritual experience, because that might open the door to more or less imaginary and falsified experiences, to moments of the vital which take the appearance of higher things. One may deceive oneself by having an aspiration for experiences. In fact, the experience must come spontaneously as a result of the inner progress, but not for itself or on itself, says our Divine Mother. Next subtopic, come out of words. Our Divine Mother says the main trouble is that you think with words, but these words are empty of meaning. Most of the time, they were mere words. You talk of the divine, you talk of the supreme, you talk of yoga, integral yoga, you say many things, but does all that correspond in your head to something concrete, to a thought, a feeling, a clear idea, or an experience? Or are they simply words? You must see the thing, the experience behind the words. Here we speak of integral yoga because elsewhere one could speak differently. Some would say, I am seeking a raison d'etre, and so on. Those who have a religious bent will say, I want to find the divine presence. There are 50 ways of saying the thing, but it is the thing which is important. You must feel it in your heart, and everywhere. It must be concrete, living. Otherwise, you cannot advance. You must come out of words and get into action, get into the experience, get into life. Next subtopic, contacting that. Our Divine Mother says, there is something, there is a reality which is beyond all expressions, but which we can succeed in contacting by practicing a discipline. We can identify ourselves with it. Once one is identified with it, one knows what it is, but one cannot express it, for words cannot say it. So if you use one kind of vocabulary, if you have a particular mental conviction, you will use the vocabulary corresponding to that conviction. If you belong to another group which has another way of speaking, you call it. or even think about it in that way. I'm telling you this to give you the true impression that there is something there which cannot be grasped by thought, but which does exist. But the name you give it matters little, that's of no importance. It exists. And so the only thing to do is to enter into contact with it, not to give it a name or describe it. A Divine Mother says, in fact, there is hardly any use giving it a name or describing it. One may try to enter into contact, to concentrate upon it, to live that reality, and whatever the name you give it, it is not important at all once you have the experience. The experience alone counts. When people associate this experience with a particular expression, and in so narrow a way, so closed up in itself, that apart from this formula one can find nothing, that is an inferiority. You must be able to live that reality through all the possible paths, all occasions, all formations. One must live it. For that indeed is true, for that is supremely good, that is all powerful, that knows all that. Yes, one can live that, but one cannot speak about it. And if one does speak, all that one says about it has no great importance. It is only way of speaking, that is all. There is an entire line of philosophers and people who have replaced the notion of God by the notion of an impersonal absolute, or by a notion of truth, or a notion of justice, or by a notion of progress. But for one who has within him the capacity of identifying himself with that, what has been said about it hasn't much importance. Sometimes you may read a book of philosophy, not progress a step. Sometimes you make a quiet, a fervent devotee of a religion and don't progress. There are people who have spent lifetime seated in contemplation and attain nothing. There are other people who used to do the most modest of all the manual works, like a cobbler or even beyond that. All that is needed is to succeed in identifying oneself with it and live it. At times you read one sentence in a book that leads you there. Sometimes you read entire books of philosophy or religion and you get nowhere. Our Divine Mother says there are people, however, whom the reading of philosophy books helps to go ahead, but all these things are secondary. There is only one thing that is important, that is a sincere and persistent will, for these things doesn't happen in a twinkling. So one must persevere. When someone feels that he is not advancing, he must not get discouraged. He must try to find out what is in his nature that is opposing, and then make the necessary progress. And suddenly one goes forward. And, says our Divine Mother, when you reach the end, you have an experience. And what is remarkable is that people who have followed altogether different paths with altogether different mental constructions, from the greatest believer to the most unbelieving, even materialists have arrived at that experience. It is the same for everyone, but because it is true, because it is real, because it is a soul reality. And it is quite simply that I do not say anything more. There is no importance. The way one speaks about what is important is to follow the path no matter which. Yes, to go there. Next subtopic, birth into the spirit. Our Divine Mother says, in the individual existence, the spirit is what makes all the difference, so long as one just speaks of the spirit, and it is something one has read about, whose existence one vaguely knows about, but not a very concrete reality for the consciousness. This means that one is not born into the spirit. And one is born into the Spirit, it becomes something much more concrete, much more living, much more real, much more tangible than the whole material world. And this is what makes the essential difference between human beings. When that becomes spontaneously real, the true concrete existence, the atmosphere, one can freely breathe. Then one knows one has crossed over to the other side. But as long as it is something rather vague and hazy, you have heard about it. You know that it exists, but it has no concrete reality. Well, this means that the new birth has not yet taken place, says our Divine Mother. Next subtopic, a reversal of consciousness. Our Divine Mother says, there is a moment, because it is a question, which becomes more and more and more intense and more acute when you have even the feeling precisely that things are strange, that is, they are not real. A moment comes when this sensation that you have of yourself, of being yourself, becomes strange, a kind of sense of unreality. And the question continues coming up, but then what is myself? What is myself? Well, there is a moment when it comes up with so much of a concentration, such an intensity that with this intensity of concentration, suddenly there occurs a reversal. And then instead of being on this side, you are on that side. And when you are on that side, everything is very simple. You understand? You know, you are, you live. And then you see clearly the unreality of the rest. And this is enough. Our Divine Mother says, you see, you may have to wait for days and months and years and centuries and lives before this moment comes. But if one intensifies his aspiration, there is a moment when the pressure is so great, the intensity of the question so strong that something turns over in the consciousness. And then this is absolutely what one feels. Instead of being there, being here, one is there. Instead of seeing from outside and seeking to see within, one is inside. And the minute one is within, absolutely everything changes completely. And all that seemed to him true, natural, normal, real, tangible, all that immediately it seems to him very queer, very unreal, quite absurd. But one has touched something which is supremely true and eternally beautiful, and this one never loses again. Our Divine Mother says, once the reversal has taken place, you can glide into an external consciousness, not lose the ordinary contact with the things of life, but that remains and it never moves. You may, in your dealings with others, fall back a little into their ignorance and blindness, but there is always something there, standing up within, which does not move anymore until it manages to penetrate everything to the point where it is over, where the blindness disappears forever. And this is an absolutely tangible experience, something more concrete than the most concrete object, most concrete than a blow on your head, something more real than anything whatever. This is what I say when people ask me how one may know whether he is in contact with his psychic being or how one may know whether he has found the divine. Well, it makes me laugh, for when it happens to you, it is over. You can no longer ask any questions. It is done. You know how it, you do not know, you do not ask how it happens. It is done. Next subtopic, contact with one's psychic being. Our Divine Mother says, in the ordinary life, there's not one person in a million who has a conscious contact with his psychic being, even momentarily. The psychic being may work from within, but so invisibly and unconsciously for the outer being that it is as though it did not exist. And in most cases, the immense majority, almost the totality of cases, it is as though it were asleep, not at all active, in a kind of torpor. Our Divine Mother says it is only with the sadhana and a very persistent effort that one succeeds in having a conscious contact with his psychic being. In almost all cases, a very sustained effort is needed to become aware of one's psychic being. Usually, says our Divine Mother, it is considered that if one can do it in 30 years, one is very lucky. 30 years of sustained effort, I say. It may happen that it's quicker, but it is so rare that immediately one says this is not an ordinary human being. That's the case of people who have been considered more or less divine beings who are great yogis and great initiates, says our Divine Mother.